Welcome to Flix List here on WHYR LP 96.9 FM, Baton Rouge Community Radio. This is the show where we spend a half hour talking about movies, movie-related subject matter, and mostly each other. All right, let's get things started. I believe you guys have our first review of the day.
Indeed we do.
Yeah, we do. It's a Manhattan Murder Mystery. It's a Woody Allen movie from 1993.
Starring both Woody Allen and Diane Keaton. Again, you may remember from Annie Hall.
Yeah, they weren't too bad in old Annie Hall, were they?
No, not at
No,
all.
and it's a similar set of characters that they play, actually. They play similar characters to that which they played.
So it's, as it sounds, it's a murder mystery, as the Woody Allen is not known for his real creative titles.
Well, actually, the funny thing about that is normally Woody Allen movies, as most movies do, have a working title when they're being shot. It's not the title that they wind up using. It's just something that you slap on there so you can go ahead and get the ball rolling. And actually, he always like
Flix List.
like Flix List, yes. And so basically, normally you change that name, but he couldn't think of anything better. Its working title was Manhattan Murder Mystery, and when it came time to edit, it was all shot and editing. He's like, whatever, fine, Manhattan Murder Mystery.
Sounds good. Well, anyway, so this movie is from 1993, and it's actually the first appearance of Zach Braff from Scrubs fame.
Yeah.
It's his like first sort of on-screen
Film debut.
role. Yeah, he plays their son for a brief, like 30-second scene. So don't expect any Scrubs antics whatsoever.
So the general basic plot here is that Diane Keaton and Woody Allen, their characters are married. They live in a Manhattan apartment, and they wind up coming across an older couple who lives on their floor in their apartment complex. They, kind of begrudgingly befriend them. They feel obligated to come in and have a cup of coffee. And so they kind of get to know this older couple. And then soon after, the next day or so, the wife dies of a heart attack. And Diane Keaton's character seems to think that this is suspicious. And the general plot of the movie from there follows her desire to find out this mystery. She thinks something else is going on, and she's on the case.
She suspects the husband of foul play.
Foul play.
Everybody knows it's the butler.
Murder most foul.
The interesting thing for me about this movie is, as most Woody Allen movies do, it focuses a lot on character dynamics and the relationships between characters. And, so it kind of focuses on this marriage that's kind of lost its sheen, lost its luster, and gotten a little complacent. And it's almost the wife's desire to break out and have some adventure in an otherwise mundane, routine life.
She has created drama where there is only boredom.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, an old lady dying of a heart attack, while always tragic, is about as everyday as death gets.
Yeah, and so the whole movie you're wondering, is she onto something, or is she just lonely?
She's making this stuff up to be excited about something.
Totally.
What really impressed me about the film was that, the entire film seems like it was only, 12 shots.
Yeah, oh my gosh, the camera work.
Yeah, it was. Woody Allen is famous for just these one-shot things, but normally they're one-shot static or kind of just panning back and forth.
Was he doing kind of a Scorsese follow?
Yeah.
Oh, he was showing
Steadicam?
off. Not only was he
off.
He had a one shot where it was a room full of mirrors.
Yeah,
and
a room full of mirrors,
one
and
shot.
Panning back and forth and stuff, and
It's like
walking around.
Yeah, it's like
Wow.
they're just showing off. Look what we can do.
Filmmaker acrobatics.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
man.
There were certain things that, not only did they have a room full of mirrors to show off, but just throughout the whole movie, they would put mirror where you could have put a painting, whatever. They would put a mirror and go across it, but you still wouldn't see the camera. Sometimes it was just amazing to even figure out how they would do it.
Yeah, where is the cameraman?
Well, because ultimately, Woody Allen started off as a writer and a stand-up comedian and became a filmmaker. And he's a filmmaker in the way that, let's say, a Kevin Smith is a filmmaker, where it's really all about the writing. And then they just turn a camera on and you watch characters speak the dialogue, this brilliant dialogue that these guys have written.
Yeah.
But maybe Woody Allen got tired of I don't know, being spoken about like that, and you get the sense that maybe he's really flexing his filmmaker muscle. I mean, did you find it distracting, or was it fun and added
Well,
to?
I don't know if it would have been. It certainly wasn't distracting in a bad way, but because we know so much about film,
We're giant nerds.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't know if anybody would have even noticed.
Yeah,
that.
and that's the thing. It's not that we're like uber perceptive or great people, but it's the fact that we know like that setting up a shot, usually you do it from 1,000 different angles and it takes all day. And seeing something done in one shot is then impressive from that standpoint.
Yeah, like normally on a film set, whenever you're working, I mean, you could have 30 to 50 setups in a day, different camera setups, and I can imagine that they shot, and all that would do is cover like 3 minutes of a film.
Right.
So you're doing 12 hours or whatever. Woody Allen would have a single setup for an entire scene, like an entire
Right, so that's
5-7
your
minute
day.
scene, and that's the whole day is just
A couple
one
of
setup.
days.
Yeah, just one setup. This was originally this script was supposed to be Annie Hall, and Woody Allen didn't think it was heavy enough.
Annie Hall was supposed to have a subplot of murder mystery, and what he did was he took that subplot out and turned it into its own movie, which is this.
Oh, that's so bizarre. Something 25 years later. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'll out of 5 stars, I'll give it 4.
Yeah, I think that I'll give it. Man, let's go with 3.5.
Really?
Well, I'm not a huge Woody Allen fan, but this one was definitely a cut above the rest, in my opinion.
Well, and then this movie is available on Netflix Instant Play, as with all the movies that we will be reviewing today.
All right, Clay, so why don't you tell us about one of the movies you have to share this week?
Well, one of the movies I saw was Hugh Hefner, Playboy, activist, and rebel. It was directed by Bridget Berman and is undoubtedly about one of the more saintly, inspiring men.
We'll say iconic.
Obviously Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Hefner. These names run in the similar
They
elk.
roll off the tongue.
No, but it was. It's simply a documentary about really the vast majority of his life so far. They sort of breeze by childhood and really start the documentary's meat when he starts the magazine that he so famously published, Playboy. There's lots of really interesting things you find out about old Hugh. His humanitarian charity is obviously quite overlooked compared to some of the more tittillating facts about his life.
No pun intended there.
No pun intended. And honestly, could certainly easily be downplayed. I mean, the man led what can only be called a fantasy lifestyle.
Slightly ostentatious.
Right? A little
scotch.
bit. A scotch. But it's funny, what led me to this movie was I had rediscovered my love of early Bond movies, which I do once every couple of years. I'll go, you know what I haven't watched in a while? Bond. And then I'll watch all of them. I love these movies. But it's such an interesting time period where there's a very iconic style and there's a very lost machismo where having a completely misogynistic male figure is totally okay. We long gone is that day where James Bond will kiss a woman to shut her up. That's not okay. That's sexual assault. And I'm not a fan. I don't think that's okay in the least bit. But it's a lot of fun in these old movies because it's fiction and it's not real.
For all the ladies out there, we love you and we respect you, and we would never.
I would never dream of kissing a woman to shut her up.
Nah, speak for yourself.
So I find this documentary, and what it is you kind of realize that Hugh Hefner sort of embodies the realist version of James Bond we have. Now, you take away all the boring stuff about James Bond, like he's a spy and he's got a job and all that stuff.
It's really superfluous.
And you put him in, wonderful mansions, surround him by buxom women.
And no evil geniuses.
Genii. And you've got this Hugh Hefner character and this mythology that you get a sense that he very purposely built for himself. you see him through the decades and how society's views on him changed when the women's movement got really strong in the 70s. He took a big hit. He's got wonderfully intelligent defenses of what he does, which whether or not you agree or disagree, which I can certainly see people falling either way, whether or not he is a pornographer or a freedom fighter. He obviously sees himself very much as a somebody who's fighting for basic constitutional rights. Others see him as a smut peddler and a pornographer, and I can certainly see the argument falling either way. But nevertheless, he makes very intelligent arguments about why he does what he does and why what he feels like he's doing is a positive thing. And then, funny enough, in the 80s, when the country got real conservative, the magazine just, started doing very poorly. But it follows him through, the heydays, into some troubled times, and back, into a resurgence. Obviously, pre-internet, where you can see all sorts of things for free, things that you don't want to see. It's all there. Everything's available. But it actually led me to go to a vintage shop that I like to go to here in town, where they have a pile of these old Playboys. And I guess it helped me rediscover the whole culture, in that I can open up a Playboy from the 1960s or 70s and read Kurt Vonnegut Jr. I can read Cameron Crowe interviewing David Bowie. Wow. I can read really phenomenal literature.
So what you're saying is basically the Playboy magazine, as we may or may not know it today, is a completely different animal from what it was back then. It was more of a
could only
sophisticated...
describe it as night and day. If there was an interesting movie or musician or writer or cartoonist happening, they were featured in Playboy.
So from what you're saying, it would seem almost as though it really was at the time, and I'm not saying that I know because I haven't read it, but it would seem like you're saying that at the time it was really a gentleman's magazine in the truest sense.
Yeah, I mean, in the truest sense, it can be. I mean, it's still weighted down by our modern view of misogyny, of our modern view of sexism.
So it still has
it still certainly has that edge to it, which is unfortunate. I wish it didn't. But if you want to talk about just pure intelligence, it's absolutely there. And I think it's a great documentary on the man who created it, and whether or not you agree with him, really the documentary shows off his humanity, his kindness, and that he is an extremely intelligent dude.
Does it tell you why he only wears that robe?
Because that robe is awesome.
That's their explanation.
No, well, that's my explanation.
Oh, okay.
That's neither here nor there.
No. Well, in the 50s he wore suits. In the 60s he wore suits. The robe, I think, was a later addition because he wore it so often around the house that it suddenly became something that was part of his mystique, his mythology.
How impressive do you think it would be if I brought back the seersucker suit? If I started wearing that everywhere I went?
I would love you forever.
I think I would love myself
I've
too.
been told, actually, I'm engaged, my wedding's coming up. I've been told that I am actually going to be wearing a seersucker suit at my wedding.
Gosh.
Now, I was told this by the bride who's, making these plans, and I'm agreeing wholeheartedly with whatever she says. But apparently I'll be decked out in seersucker. So I think we should all do our part to bring back a little southern classiness in the name of Hugh Hefner.
I think that's a great idea.
I'm glad we've gotten so far off topic. Out of 5 stars, Clay.
Out of 5 stars, I will give this documentary 4 stars.
Very nice.
It's if you're interested in the lifestyle, this is going to be a fascinating documentary. If you hate this lifestyle, you're probably not going to be a big fan of the documentary, but give it a shot because it may provide counterpoints to
may
your
at least
opinions.
give you insight. It's always good to understand
the other side.
The other side, whether you agree or not.
All right, so the next one you guys want to do, I think, is Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Yep.
A cult classic.
Like the iconic, the cult classic Evil Dead by Sam Raimi, the director and writer, starring his childhood best friend, Bruce Campbell, made in 1981.
Yeah, it was made, well,
it was
actually
actually
released.
It was shot over the course, from what RCL was telling me yesterday, over a year and a half.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's a very, very low budget movie. It's about $350,000 to make this movie.
Holy smoke.
Yeah, which may sound like a lot of money, but
No, not at all.
It's not at all, and it's gross to date, or as of 2009, early 2009, the gross to date was $30 million that it's made.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what a cult classic will do for you.
The funny thing about filmmaking is there are $350,000 shots in films.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is a $350,000 movie.
So basically, to catch those up, I'm sure most have seen Evil Dead, but to catch those up that haven't, it's these 5 Michigan State students. They go out on a trip to a cabin and discover a Book of the Dead in the cabin.
The Necronomicon.
It's not referred to as the Necronomicon in the first Evil Dead. It's referred to as something else. I can't recall right now what it's referred to, but they don't start calling it the Necronomicon until the Evil Dead 2 and then Army of Darkness.
Okay.
But it's the same book.
I did watch this movie, by the way. I swear.
But so they find this Book of the Dead and a recording of somebody who is reading it. And they turn the recording on, and the recording is this guy making the enchantments of the Book of the Dead, and it raises demons into this cabin. And then the demons go through and pick them off one by one, and possessing them, killing some of them.
So the plot is pretty basic horror movie stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
The
much.
stuff horror movies are made of. What makes this movie the cult classic?
Well, I think that RCL might actually appreciate the movie more than me. I'm a huge buzzkill when it comes to movies. I don't respect
not
anything.
all movies, just ironic movies.
I mean, I don't respect anything purely based on the reputation that it has. I don't respect anything just because it has a large standing or following. And so I might step on some toes saying that this cult classic didn't strike me as nearly... I enjoyed it, but it wasn't worthy of the praise that I feel like it gets.
Yeah, it's got a 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Which is nearly, it's insane. Like Shawshank Redemption has something like 98 or 97%, and it's widely regarded as one of the best movies of all time.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. It's also considered a comedic horror film by some. And I've seen this movie several times, and I watched it again last night. The comedy didn't strike me at all.
It didn't come through, and I think the reason for that is, honestly, if I remember correctly, I read this a long time ago, a couple years. I believe that Sam Raimi actually intended on the first Evil Dead to be a legitimate horror movie.
That's true.
And the thing is that he really brought in satire with Evil Dead 2, and then he really switches from satire to just outright humor and ridiculosity in our Army of Darkness.
And now there's a stage musical.
Yeah.
You just made up that word, ridiculosity. I'm calling you out. I'm not sure of that at all. I'm not sure that may be a real word, but I'm gonna go ahead and say you made it up.
I'm calling Webster's right now.
Do you think then that this movie has gained such a cult following based on its sequels?
I think
it's more self-aware sequels.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
I think Army of Darkness is really the highest profile of the three, which is just my humble opinion.
That's the first one I saw.
Yeah,
was Army
me
of Darkness.
too.
I didn't know that there was any connection to him.
It's also very much
a
of
long
our
time.
generation because it came out in the 90s.
Exactly.
Right. I remember being a little kid and looking up at the movie poster of Ash with a chainsaw attached to one hand and a shotgun in the other.
And then the busty chick.
And wanting to see that movie, being 4 years old, and my dad
based on the poster,
and my dad being like, no.
Oh yeah, I remember being on vacation with my best friend in middle school. We're like in 7th grade, and we go to Florida and we get a copy of Army of Darkness and watch it in the hotel room while we're on vacation. And that, I remember that fondly. It was great, but Army of Darkness is really the one that has always stood out in my mind. So I feel like this one has its place as the predecessor.
Well, and also, I mean, to be fair, there were some legitimately skin-crawling, creepy moments.
Oh,
in this.
yeah, dude.
Sam Raimi, for such a small budget, did a really good job. I mean, especially scaring or freaking somebody out nowadays is so much harder.
It's a much harder.
I can't imagine how much of an effect. I know it was banned in Germany because it was so
What?
Yeah.
And I think
it's the Germans couldn't stomach it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, and I think I've probably talked bad about it enough. Not that I've talked bad about it, but I think I'm done saying anything negative about it because it is legitimately.
Its weaknesses are glaring.
Yeah,
I think is what you're
its
saying.
weaknesses are glaring, but it is overall a movie that can totally be appreciated. And I don't really want the lynch mobs coming after me saying that their favorite cult classic is not worthy of their praise. So just to keep my own life safe, I'm gonna start saying it was pretty decent.
That's what I love. A man who just drops his convictions.
I'm sorry. There's people with pitchforks and torches outside. Let me change my mind.
I have my standards, and if you don't like them, I have others.
I'm very firmly flexible.
All right, out of 5, what do y'all think?
If I'm gonna just go base it right on the value of the movie beyond what it became, and I'll give it 3 stars because it was a horror movie. It did freak me out a little bit. There were times that were very skin crawly, so I'll give it 3. Certainly not very high production value, but.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to agree with you there. There were moments where special effects were lacking. I could tell that someone being hit by a shovel or whatever was obviously a puppet, something like that, which those are forgivable offenses.
In fact, they're part of what makes the audience for this movie love it so much.
Yeah.
Right.
Those offenses.
And so I'm stepping on toes, but I'm going to give it a 3 as well.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
So the next movie that Clay is mostly going to review is Howl, starring James Franco. It was actually directed by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, which is very odd to have a film to have 2 directors.
Yeah, I believe that means that neither one of them is in the Directors Guild.
Yeah.
It's a very strict rule to only allow 1 director per movie.
Yeah, I can't believe that I'm about to ask this. Is it the Coen brothers who trade back and forth?
They trade purposely.
Yeah, one of them's listed at, like, they both co-write, but then one of them's listed as the director, one of them's listed as a producer.
When in actuality, they both do both. All right, I'm going to try to fit this one in real quick. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but for any lovers of poetry or modern art, I am going to say this movie is a must-see. James Franco, who I was very wishy-washy about for most of his career. Ooh, I like him in this, I hate him in that, I like him in this, I hate him in that, is amazing in this.
Wow.
It's a really stellar performance. The movie is done basically in 3 parts. One is about the obscenity trials that happens to James Franco, who's playing Allen Ginsberg, the poet. The beat poet, the hippest of the poets, His publisher gets sued for obscenity. Now, this poem that I think gets read by high school students nowadays was on obscenity trials in the 50s. So one part of the movie is the actual trial. It's kind of like a courtroom drama. 1/3 of the movie is interviews with Franco as Ginsberg, who he does a masterful job of playing a very young Allen Ginsberg. A very honest, and I want to say earnest. Earnest is the word I'm looking for. And then the 3rd part is an animated piece that was
weird.
built around an actual reading of Howl.
Does that flow?
Absolutely not.
That's what I'm thinking. That sounds like
it
might
is
stick
very
out like
jarring.
a
So
sore thumb.
two of the pieces of the film I think flow very well in and out of each other. The 3rd one is very beautiful, and after hearing so much about the poet and the poetry, you desperately want to hear the poem. Now, poetry is like painting. They don't play music in museums when you're viewing paintings because it affects your viewing of the painting.
Yeah.
So it's silence. And in the same way, a poem should be read without visual aid because it affects your interpretation of the poem. Unfortunately, this is a movie. And there's no such thing as a black screen for 1/3 of your movie. No, and the 3 sections of the film are cut together to greater or less success. But every piece of this movie is beautifully, artistically done with a great love for the work that it's covering. Maybe I'm a little prejudiced, but because I really love this era and these, the beat poets.
Yeah.
Burroughs, Kerouac, Ginsberg, some of the best, and they're, it's wonderful American stuff.
Well, it's kind of intriguing you talk about the 3 parts of the film because that's how the poem Howl is. There's 3 parts.
There's also in 3 parts.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. And in that way, it was a very faithful retelling. So before we run out of time, I'm going to give this movie 4.5 stars.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Out of 5. That's
I mean,
right. 5 being Citizen Kane. This is 4.5.
Wow.
So if you're a lover of this sort of thing, it's available on Netflix Instant.
That was Netflix, not Netflix.
I say what I said, all right? So y'all want to wrap up today's episode by reiterating that we're going to rename the show, and we want you,
Our audience, our loving, adoring audience of 3 people,
Yeah.
to contact us with your suggestions for our new name.
if you win, we'll bring you onto the show. You can announce it, and we'll do a review of one of your favorite movies with you. Have a very pleasant rest of your day. I'm DJ Clay.
I'm Chewy.
And I'm Marcial.
Goodbye.